YouTube, Facebook. We're out there. We're also out on Adrian's channel. So if you're out there on the socials and you want to chat with us, go ahead and you can type in we should be able to see your messages and so on and so forth. Well, let me intro what we're doing here today. This is Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks here in the piano world. This includes manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour for just $16 a month. You can get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. You can join using the link bit.ly/joinptrh. That's bit.ly/joinptrh. Also, don't forget to check out our podcast at pianotechradio.com. We just started more actively releasing episodes, a lot of great content coming out. We've been popular all over the world, reaching top positions in the performing arts category on iTunes in locations all over the globe. You could also check out our blog at pianotechniciansmasterclass.substack.com and check out our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. We're active there, and you can keep abreast of what's going on. And don't forget to sign up for our email list. When you go to pianotechniciansmasterclass.com, there's a place to sign up. You'll get updates about everything that's going on. I'd love to intro our guest today now. Our guest today's name is Adrian Werum. He is a multi-talented musician whose career spans several disciplines, including piano, violin, composition, and conducting. He is the founder of the Orchestras der Kulturen, an ensemble known for its unique blend of ethnic and classical instruments. Adrian's diverse background includes collaboration with renowned artists like Indonesian jazz pianist Deviana Daudja, and his work as a composer and conductor has been recognized across the globe. Notably, he composed the operetta Hollywood Diva and served as the musical supervisor for Frank Wildhorn's Carmen in Prague. His contributions have earned him prestigious accolades such as the Manfred Rommel Prize. Adrian continues to push the boundaries of musical innovation while remaining deeply rooted in tradition. We're excited to hear about his experiences and insights into music across different genres, from classical to musical theater. Adrian, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Pleasure, yeah. Hi there.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, it's great to have you here. We always like to get started, launch in with a little bit of history and recall back to your early days, just discovering music and how you first got involved in music as a musician and your passion for it, and kind of see how that connects to where you're at today. So what are your earliest memories of your passion for music, your involvement with music?
Oh, actually, I started playing the piano when I was 4 or 5 because I saw my father playing the piano. He owned a grocery store, but always had a passion for music. And my whole family is kind of a bi-talented group of people. Yeah, so people usually have a mercantile talent and some music or poetic talent on the side. Yeah, and my first fun memory actually was playing piano at my grandfather's house. And for every time I played piano, he gave me 5 marks, 5 German marks, which was a lot of money for at that time, because ice cream cost 25 cents then, so you could buy a lot of ice creams for these 5 marks. And he was very consistent with that. So I still clearly remember when they changed the eagle on the coin. That was 1977, and then I got different 5 marks coins. Yeah, so. And that's, that kind of continued in my life a little bit,
I'm going to pause you there. That's very interesting. Yeah. So my son takes cello lessons, and my wife is mostly playing with him. Even though I'm more the musician, she's kind of taking the lead and like helping him practice and things.
Yeah.
and she does do this thing where she has like chocolate chips or some sort of
Ah,
candy, right? And he does the
okay.
song, and she gives him a little
Yeah,
reward and all these things.
yeah,
And it's funny because whenever I practiced when I was a kid, I never got any of that stuff. So I'm
yeah.
like, is that necessary? Is that good? Is that bad? But I think that's so interesting. These type of rewards that kids get playing. How do you feel about it in retrospect? Like
You
if
know,
you're teaching, do you think you would do that sort of a
well,
reward? I'm
actually,
yeah.
actually, it had two sides of it, because I only got these 5 marks at my grandfather's house. When I was at
Uh-huh.
home, my mother was very strict on setting the clock, and was always 45 minutes for piano and 15 minutes for violin. And I tried to cheat, I admit to that, but she was very, very strict about that, so it had two sides, yeah. And these
Okay,
five
okay.
marks, these 5 marks, they only came not on a very regular basis, it's more
Okay,
for
okay.
family reunions and things like that, things that you could look forward to, yeah.
Okay, got it. So it's like a micro reward in certain circumstances. That
Yes,
makes sense. Interesting. All right, continue. Okay, so you had a lot of um you had an interest in it. You wanted to do it. You said your
yeah,
father played and you saw that, and then
yeah,
your family was very encouraging from multiple directions, whether it was
yeah,
mom being a little bit more of a disciplinarian or the grandfather, sort of
yeah.
giving the carrot as opposed to the stick. How did it continue from there?
Well, I basically have kind of these two traditions from my family, because my father's family is from West Germany, uh, which is another very strong carnival region on the Rhine River. And my mother is from Upper Silesia, which is now part of Poland. And so from my father's side, it was more the passion for Bach. So we listened to Bach passions every Sunday morning. And from my mother's side, it was Chopin. Yeah, so and I always could make my mother very happy when I played Chopin. And in that time, I'm so old, that I still remember the communist times in Europe. Yeah, but it was very hard for East Germans to get out, but for Polish people, it was a little bit easier. Yeah, because their communist system wasn't so strict for most of the time. Yeah, and so we had a lot of friends coming over from Poland, and they stayed with us for sometimes 2 months or 3 months. And so basically, we had every evening we had a great food. My mother was a wonderful cook, and then they drank vodka and had fun. And when Polish people are drunk, they always like to listen to Chopin. And so I had to go to the piano as a child and play Chopin. And since I had a very limited repertoire, I started improvising in the style of Chopin. Yeah. And then my father kind of uh, realize that, and then say, you have to go to composition class, or you have to take composition lessons. Yeah, so that's how it developed a little bit. And then later on, I was also very lucky, also still in these communist time, that I was 16. And for several summers, I traveled alone from West Germany to Poland and worked with a piano technician to learn to repair pianos, repair organs, tune pianos, tune organs. And it was a very interesting time, because sometimes we got paid in American flour. Yeah. So American flour or other things, were sent over to help the Polish people. And that was kind of a trade, so you didn't trust your local currency, but you got paid in yeah, goods, nourishment, yeah. Yeah. Oops.
Sorry, I was muted. I was saying, wow,
Uh,
that's
yeah,
fascinating. Um, So tell me about how deep you went, because this show, of course, our foundation is piano tech, right?
yeah,
Being a
yeah,
technician, taking care
yeah.
of pianos. How did you end up going? Did you you learn to tune pianos? I guess did you learn to do any repairs or regulations? Has any of that stuck with you, or is that kind of distant history? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at some point in my life, I think it was 10 years ago, I sold my piano tech tools, yeah, because I never became a really good piano tuner, yeah. And when I can repair little things, yeah, and also regulate, yeah, but I don't have really the practice, yeah. So, but it was very interesting for me to work on it and also I also love the organs, to climb inside on the organ and to discover how it all works. And it was also interesting in that time, even in Poland, they had horrible socialist pianos, and the mechanics were almost all the time West German. Yeah, so you had always to distinguish, what makes a good mechanic on the piano. Mostly at that time was Renner, yeah, and it was very interesting job as especially also socially, that you to see a different society, how it works, and so on.
Wow, there's a lot of directions we could go here. I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to hear about, because I feel like I've only talked with a few people about this, but do you have
Mhm.
anything to say about the transition from music in, in the communist socialist systems versus music outside of it?
Oh,
Before and after kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah. When I was living constantly there, so of course my knowledge is maybe a little bit superficial, yeah. But in that time, as in the East, also in East Germany, generally in Eastern Europe, they music had a very high value, yeah, even more so than in the West, yeah. I mean, still in the West, after Woodstock, also in Europe, yeah, when music was very important, especially for young people. But in the East, it became almost like a religion, yeah. So when young people were trading LPs, yeah, like I mean, we had to get kind of Western currency to buy them, yeah, and it was very, very important for them. And for me, it was interesting to see, because I mean, people always long to be in the West, but they still have a different attitude to a lot of things there. When I worked in Russia, for example, yeah, I started working in Russia was 12 years ago. Yeah, you still can see today, that in Eastern Europe and Russia, the value of music is much higher even today. Yeah, and also especially also all kinds of art, I think, as for me, one of my pictures that stuck in my head, is sitting in front of the theater in St. Petersburg in the summer, and some young girl, beautiful girl, of course, with short skirts, reading Gogol and Tolstoy. Yeah, yeah, and it was still already the age of the smartphone. Yeah, and also when I opened my operetta Hollywood Diva in St. Petersburg, I was expecting to answer the same kind of questions like journalists ask in the West or in Central Europe, like Germany and Austria. Yeah. But in Russia, most questions were about the music, not about the staging or the story even. I mean, they asked, of course, about the Russian stars, but then a lot of questions were about the music, and uh, it has a great importance. You could also see that in the theater, that the young people came to the theater and posed in front of the piano, yeah, or pretended like playing the piano, and then a friend took a picture of them, yeah. And that's how I learned to love Russia. It's maybe an unpopular thing to say today, but Eastern Europe and especially Russia is a great cultural nation, and you can feel that even today. Yeah, yeah.
What do you think accounts for that difference? Is it a deeper connection to history, or like a more of like a conservative approach to culture? What do you think accounts for those differences that you're noticing?
It's maybe prejudice, but the depth of the emotion. Yeah. When I got a very nice compliment years ago when an orchestra in West Germany played a piece of mine or orchestration, yeah. And then a Polish violinist came up to me and said, where are you from?" And I said, "I'm from Mainz, my hometown where I grew up." He said, "No, you're Polish." It has a different quality of emotionality, and in all the arts, I think also in the theater and especially in music. And I admire it personally, you know. Yeah. But for some people, it may be a little bit too dark. Yeah, you can also see here in the pop music in Russia today. Yeah, it's it's a lot of dark stuff, yeah, going on there.
That's fascinating. So tell me a little bit more about your transition
Yeah,
into the various realms of the music domain,
yeah,
right? You're playing
yeah,
string instruments, you're
yeah,
conducting, and how did
yeah.
that all start to blossom in terms of the evolution of your life and your career?
Well, I was very lucky to have in my hometown on the Rhine a very good piano teacher who was very strict again, I have to say, and he was from East Germany, and also he had also this strict tradition with him. But he also kind of encouraged my compositional talents. Yeah, so we worked on a lot of music that was not kind of the virtuoso stuff, you know, but more interesting as a composer, you know, like Vision Fugitive de Prokofiev or Children's Corner of Debussy, but also Stravinsky, for example, yeah, and also more modern composers. And I was very lucky that at this conservatory, I was only 16, that I could join the composition class of the students. Yeah, and they studied kind of to become music teachers. Yeah, but I was allowed to be part of it. And my job, because I always was a very good sight reader, yeah, so I had to play the compositions that the other pupils wrote. And that gave me a lot of practice. And we had a wonderful teacher from the Schott Music Publishing House that is also based in Mainz, and it's a big publishing house in the classical world. They uh, published Ligeti, Jörg Ligeti, for example, yeah. And he was also a piano composition teacher. And actually, I can say that now with all the time passed, when these lessons in my hometown were much better than the university in Vienna. Yeah. Yeah. Vienna was more interesting to broaden your horizon, to see wonderful concerts at the Musikverein or Konzerthaus, and to branch out into pop music, jazz, and so on. Yeah. But the basis I had, you know, was kind of in my hometown from very good teachers, I have to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Um, do you have anything? Do you know much about Stravinsky as a conductor?
Yeah, I watched him conduct also on YouTube, of course. But you know, he was very minimal. A little bit like Richard Strauss, which is very interesting, you know, because Richard Strauss wrote this opulent music, and he was also like this. And Stravinsky was a little bit the same, I felt. Very rigid and very clear, precise, yeah, but not very emotional. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we've had a few conductors on here recently, a little bit of a string of them, and
yeah.
yeah, I've heard Stravinsky wasn't the most amazing conductor, but um, what about yourself in terms of your conducting style? What do you think is unique? What that you bring to the table?
Well, I'm basically well, self-taught in a way, you know, because when I went to Vienna after a few years, I already started working at a musical theater school, and that was my way from playing kind of piano for musical theater to conducting. Yeah, so when they closed the school, they took me over on as a conductor with Grease, yeah, which is a pretty easy show to conduct. Yeah. But I basically just played the rehearsals, and then one day they sent me down to the orchestra pit and said, "Do it." Yeah. And that was fun, you know. I gained a lot of practice. Yeah. But then the next show was Beauty and the Beast, the Walt Disney version. Yeah. And there, I think I really learned conducting, yeah, because you have to follow the stage incessantly. You know, you always have to move this. You have really learn how to move the action on stage, and how to adapt, and also watch the dancers, which movement would look good and which tempo. Yeah. And you have to be very flexible because of the spoken word. You know, that is different every night. Yeah. And I think that gave me my kind of basis also to start on Dance of the Vampire, which was a huge success in Europe. Not so much on Broadway, as I remember, but I mean, I had a great basis for that. And after that, these shows,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, that sounds like such an
yeah,
interesting challenge, like a wonderful learning opportunity.
yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit about so piano? You have your foundations in piano. That's kind of where everything
Mm,
started.
mm,
How do you think about interpreting piano music and making a particular score your own? You know, I haven't
mm,
studied extensively classically. I did get a chance to study with a
mm,
classical conductor when I was in high school. So great opportunity. Then I moved
mm,
on to jazz. But I remember I would have a recording of a piece,
mm.
and I would learn how the famous musician played it, and I would come back in and I would play it the way that they played it. And you said, don't do that,
Ah,
learn to
okay.
play it your own way, and I always
Yeah,
thought that was interesting. But everybody has their own opinions and ways of approaching things. How do you suggest folks approach making piano music their own? I suppose it's even different for different genres and different
yeah.
composers.
Well, I mean, I can only tell from my point of view, of course, and my approach, especially to classical music, was a little bit too free, I guess. Yeah. So my piano teacher always discovered that I was kind of playing some different notes from the original. Yeah. And when I started accompanying singers, I also started adding or changing some notes with classical songs by Beethoven or Schubert, I have to admit, to make it more orchestral or make it more fit my style. Yeah. And of course, in modern classical, let's say in the modern approach to classical music, this is all very verboten, forbidden, because you always have to think, oh, we have to follow the genius who started it all. But in a way, I feel it's it's not, also for me, it's not the right approach. I feel much more as I'm not a great pianist as Franz Liszt, yeah, but his approach to music, yeah, is maybe a little bit more similar than to mine. Yeah, basically taking, Franz Liszt took Ständchen by Schubert, yeah, and he made it his own fantasy. When Schubert it's very, and Liszt started adding, he started orchestrated basically on the piano, yeah, and then he used also themes by older composers, and just used kind of the basic material and went to a different planet with it, basically, yeah. And that's how I also like to work. For example, I did a version of Ave Verum by Mozart, because of course of my name. But I started with a solo singer who sings this song, and then I wrote a new part, with cajon solo that's almost like a hard rock feel, yeah. And also I think that many people in classical music here, at least in Europe, don't think that I write classical music. Yeah, but for me, it's classical music. For me, it's just the same tradition, actually. That how composers in the 19th century, but also in the 18th century, looked at music and music of other composers. Yeah, and today is a little bit too rigid, I feel. Yeah, yeah. And we always train people, to perform right and perfect, but not to be creative with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. It's funny. Um, I'm very improvisational in my own
mm,
style, in a
mm.
lot of things. Sorry, if you see my hand waving around, there's like a fly that just
Ah, okay.
insists on
That's,
landing on this microphone constantly.
mm,
Um, but yes, I'm very improvisational in my style. I like to learn, the way things are supposed to be done, quote
mm,
unquote, as well.
mm,
But it was funny. I had an interesting moment. Uh, At the moment, my significant other, she does not like to eat my cooking,
Hmm.
and she will kind of, I think it's actually pretty good, but she'll make these comments like, "I follow a recipe." You know, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you have to put the right amount of the. There's a
Yeah,
reason that you have the ratios and the different
yeah,
ingredients and things like that.
yeah.
And I appreciated that comment recently, and I've been following recipes more. But at
Hmm.
the same time, I feel like it is there's something special and magical even about the tiny nuances. Once you know
Hmm.
a recipe, just think I'm going to add a little bit more salt, or you
Yeah.
taste it and you go, you know what, like let's add some cumin or whatever. You add
Hmm.
some thing because it's coming from your
Hmm.
own inspiration, right? So that's just my style. But that's kind of funny.
Yeah.
I think it's also interesting, as I've said, watching my son learn an instrument too, because
Hmm.
I'm also trying to connect back to those, remember back to the time when
Hmm.
I was supposed to learn the way to
Hmm.
do it and
Hmm.
playing in a very strict way, and this is how you're
Hmm.
supposed to do this, and this is how you're supposed to hold the bow, and this is,
Hmm.
and it's also very important. Um, but I feel like at a certain point, once you've learned so much, there's a point where you disconnect a little bit from that. You have the basics, and you really want to expand and improvise and change things and be creative and break the rules.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, what is your style when you are just straight out composing? Is it what do you draw from in terms of your inspiration? What styles do you like to compose in, and so forth?
Well, no, because of my influences from my childhood, as I told you about Bach and Chopin, and maybe the third influence was, we had an American occupation force in my hometown too, which were a friendly occupation, yeah. But so I always like enjoyed listening to AFN network radio, the American Forces radio, and I still remember listening to a lot of psychedelic music when I was 13, yeah. And that's maybe the other influence. So I always in my mind try to connect these influences from pop music with my classical upbringing, yeah. And the other lucky point in my life was, my father sold his grocery store when I was 7. And after 2 more years, he suddenly was a music teacher. Yeah. Like nobody knew how it happened, yeah, because he never studied music. But he's fake your way to the top, we like to say in our family. So suddenly he was a great music teacher, and he had to buy all the modern pop and rock music, and suddenly we had records with German punk music and electronic Bach and Pink Floyd and yeah, Carole King. I don't know. It's very, very diverse. Beatles, of course, Stones, yeah. And suddenly I had a much more interesting choice. And but in my mind, I always admired kind of the big forms in the sonata form or in the symphony. And my internal goal always has been kind of to combine the strength and the formality and the ability to work with very, very little material. Yeah, like especially like Beethoven, yeah, where you have just one motif, yeah, and transform it into something amazing and completely different. Yeah. And to do that also with kind of technical stylistical things from pop music or jazz, that always interested me. Yeah. Yeah. And also world music now, yeah, nowadays. Yeah.
Tell me what are your listening habits these days? Do you listen to bouts of different styles? I'm going to listen to classical for a little bit. Now I'm in a mood for some rock.
Yeah.
Is it all mixed together? Do you even listen to music? Because I know sometimes it's hard to find time,
Yeah.
outside of your working life, musically.
Yeah, since I live in Italy now, and mostly work in Germany, I have these long car rides sometimes, where I really like to enjoy listening to music. But it really depends on my mood, So I always also like to listen to kind of modern, serious kind of classical music, yeah, because of the sounds you can achieve, yeah, and it's orchestrational things mostly, yeah, but also because of, just inspiration, yeah, and jazz, mostly I always love big band jazz, but also cool jazz. Uh, when I, Also very much, I'm a 70s guy, yeah, and I enjoy at the same time. You're everything. This is kind of disco, my baby, you're everything. Disco style at the same time, kind of these free jazz and or jazz rock things and expansionist pop themes like Pink Floyd. Uh, that's kind of more my basis, kind of for or a group that I rediscovered, which I really loved hearing in my childhood was Exception. And they were a Dutch jazz rock band that also used a lot of classical themes. And, in a way, I do kind of the same thing with my orchestra today. Yeah, yeah,
Mm. Yeah, that's amazing. I actually was in a coffee shop locally a few days ago, and there was a place you get your own coffee. You get the bottomless
yeah.
cup or whatever. You can bring your cup
Mm,
over for your own coffee. And this guy's next to me, and he's this older gentleman, and
mm,
he has a Def Leppard T-shirt on, and uh, and I was just struck up a short conversation with him, and he said he was something like in his 80s. He looked
mm,
really good for his age. Um, and I think I mentioned Pink Floyd.
mm,
I said, I know a guy that was playing saxophone for Pink Floyd. Very cool guy. His name's
mm,
Scott. I'll think of his last name. But he said, "Oh yeah, I used to, whatever. I used to see them here in the
mm,
city often."
mm,
And he said, "I used to sell them things." And then he walked away. I was
mm.
thinking, I think I know what he sold them.
Okay.
I also heard, gosh, where was I hearing this? It must have been a podcast or something about Pink Floyd and the point. I guess there was this very controversial point at which, was it Roger Waters left the band? Were you
Oh,
paying much attention to that?
yeah, there was some political stuff as well, yeah, but
Yeah,
didn't follow it too closely, yeah. Yeah,
he was
yeah.
trying to basically own the music and saying the rest of the band couldn't play it anymore, and
Oh, okay.
ultimately they won like a legal battle that they could continue playing the music without him.
Oh, okay.
I think I heard it on the Tetragrammaton podcast with um, I'll think of his name. He's like
Mm,
Rick Rubin, famous
mhm,
record producer.
yeah.
I recommend the podcast. But yeah, this was such a versatile mix of taste that you have there. How do you recommend people? Do you have any go-to uh, recommendations if somebody wants to get into classical, or
Uh,
orchestral music, but they're coming from the popular world or the rock and roll world or the jazz world or something like that? Do you send them to a certain
mm,
direction, or how do you think
mm.
about that?
Ah, I haven't thought about that yet, actually, but maybe it's a good start, to I don't know, it's different for every person. I think it's mostly best, to just play them things that you think are really valuable and interesting, apart from your own musical taste, where you really feel like these are important works. Yeah. And because I think there's value in listening to Schoenberg or to Weber and Ligeti and Stravinsky and maybe also John Lord with the symphony orchestra. Yeah, so I think it's best to show kind of big diversity, yeah, or possibilities, yeah, that are or unanswered question by David Ives, yeah, yeah, because people tend, especially when you come, I think, from pop music, that some of the very popular works, and maybe it's a good try or a good idea, to show them that works that are really kind of broadening the idea of music in itself. And then you can, from that, you can go back to more commercial writing or whatever. But you have an inspiration that goes way beyond your own experience.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Can you talk about when you're playing with rehearsals with like singers and
Mm-hmm.
dancers, and this is kind of like a whole behind the scenes aspect
Mm-hmm.
of conductors and players, accompanists, and things like that. How do you think about rehearsal time and how that's executed properly?
Rehearsal time, yeah. Okay. Well, I usually like to be very efficient, yeah, but it also depends on the country where you're working in. Yeah. For example, with musical theater, which is kind of my professional background. For example, in Germany and the German-speaking countries, yeah, I was used, to always sing all the lines for the ensemble. Yeah. Also the tenor lines and the soprano lines, because you cannot expect everybody to read music really well. Yeah. But if you go to Russia, for example, and you just make like this, and they all know their music perfectly already. Yeah. Yeah. But usually, I always try to go, I don't know, it's hard to explain, because you try to give a solid foundation in the rhythm, also how you play the piano during the rehearsals, that people really feel secure, that they know where's my own line rooted in a harmony, where I can take the note from which line or which note that was before, yeah, so that they also know what is happening in the other lines. And then I I'm also very strict on holding notes. They say, okay, when you have a phrase, da, da, do, da, just hold that chord, and then we go on to the next chord if there's a difficult succession, yeah, of chords, yeah, so that you have really work on the intonation and don't be sloppy on that. Yeah, yeah,
And you had mentioned earlier a little bit working with dancers.
yeah.
Um, what's that like? What is it like working with dancers? How much are you involved? Is there a choreographer who's more focused on what they're doing and you're not interfacing much? Or is there
Yeah.
a collaboration between you and whoever's doing choreography? Or um, how does that work? How much interface is there, and how do you think about that
Uh,
collaboration?
well, ideally, there should be a lot of collaboration. Yeah. Uh, but for example, I wrote an opera. Yeah, when I worked based on a novel by Hermann Hesse, yeah, Narcissus and Goldmund. And when I worked with the director there and the choreographer, they basically took the music as it is. Yeah, because for them there was already so much drama in it and so much information that they could work with it easily on stage. Yeah, but I also worked in a very different style, like shows like Frank Wildhorn, for example, or also Dance with Vampires was not a great example, because there you had Polanski, Roman Polanski, legendary director. He was sitting in the rehearsal and he said, in the movie, Sarah, she was sitting in the bathtub and she was doing something like, ah, ah. And then you have the piano. Yeah, and then you try to make up something. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then you basically develop the scene from a little theme that is given to you. Yeah. And that's more how you work with pop composers like Frank Wildhorn or just also Jim Steinman at the time. Yeah. When I remember I was doing also Dance with the Vampires in New York, which was, I think, still the biggest flop on Broadway after Spider-Man. But I had Jim Steinman with his whole entourage standing behind me, and then he gives just a little theme like, and then he said, make it sound like Wagner, Richard Wagner, Lohengrin, second act, third scene or whatever, and then you try to make it whatever, yeah. And then you basically make everything, and then he says yes or no, yeah. And at the end, he says, "Oh, I wrote this wonderful piece."
Ah.
Yeah, but it's all that's how it's often done in musical theater nowadays. Yeah, because you often have composers who are not from musical theater who just write songs, and uh, and then we have a music supervisor who basically takes the material from the songs and makes it work for the stage. Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah, I had no idea of these nuances. Um, by the way, I know we've been doing your sound without. We didn't set this up beforehand. Unfortunately, we're running a little
Yeah.
bit late. The original sound for musicians. Do you know how to turn that on easily in Zoom? Do you know how to set that Zoom setting or not?
Uh, quite sure. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
usually under the microphone. There's like a little
Okay.
drop-down menu, and you can go to audio settings. You
Ah.
could do
Yeah.
the,
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah.
and then you choose what is it? Original sound. It should be somewhere there. Original sound for musicians. It's one of the options. And then once you choose that, it'll allow you to turn it on and off as needed as
Mm.
well. So I can give it a try. We won't spend too much time on it, but it might be
Uh,
useful. So it's
only
all the way down. It's all the way down on the settings.
okay.
Actually, it's about halfway down on the settings. Original sound for
With
musicians.
microphone or with speakers?
Um, it's in the audio settings. Um, you have to click the
Yeah.
audio settings at the very bottom. It says audio settings dot dot dot. You click on that, and it gives you like some more advanced options. But
Yeah.
if do you see it or not?
Yeah, but I have a lot
All
of
right, we don't have to spend
extensional
much time.
Pro Tools and everything, so I'm not so
Oh, okay,
sure if
all
I
right.
should
Well, we won't worry
touch
about it.
that.
We
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
hear.
Okay.
You can hear the
Yeah.
basics.
Okay.
Um, um, no, I appreciate you sharing those details. That's fascinating. So you were spending time in New York for the Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah. I did. Yeah. The show, as we did, for example, Tears of Heaven. It was an original show by Frank Wildhorn. We workshopped first in New York, and
Mhm.
then brought it to Korea,
Mhm.
where it opened Seoul. And Dance of Vampires I did completely in New York. And so we had, before that, we had the European version that started in Vienna,
Mhm.
but then moved to Germany and basically to everywhere in Europe, so from Russia to Spain and France, of course, also. But the Broadway version was very different because Polanski was not involved because of these old legal problems he had. Yeah. And so they had a new director who just had won the Tony Awards for Urinetown, I think, Tony Udorando, and he brought along his choreographer, and they had a very, very different style. And so it was a very, very different show from Europe, uh, uh, which was not the most fortunate decision, unfortunately.
Mm. Mm.
Because, in Europe, the show just closed after 25 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And in Vienna, I played, I think, 4 times. I played the first time we opened it, it played for 3 years, and then it came back for several years, 3 times. Also in Stuttgart, where I conducted a lot, the show came back for 3 or 4 times, and I played in all the major German cities, the Netherlands, Belgium as well, I think, France, Spain. Yeah, it's really amazing success. So, yeah.
Tell me about your time in New York. How did you enjoy it, or did you how much time have you spent in New York total? Is it a matter of
Yeah,
months or
it was
years?
a matter a few months. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I was thinking about staying. Yeah, but I wasn't so sure about the show itself, and I was a bit afraid. I was a young father at that time. Yeah, so I was a bit afraid if the show closes early, I would be stuck with my family and 2 small children in New York without having any big connections or so. So I went back after a few months, but that time was really great. Yeah, because I loved really doing what I did. When I told you how I improvised for Jim Steinman and work on his motifs. And also I worked with Michael Crawford. He was the kind of original Phantom. He was a big star of the show at the time. And also a very young Mandy Gonzalez. I think she's now pretty famous in the Broadway circles. You know, she did In the Heights and many other shows, and she was a wonderful talent already back then. So we had a really amazing cast. It was really amazing cast. So
What years was it? What year was it that you were there?
it was 2002 or 2003,
Okay,
something like
okay,
that. Uh,
great, wonderful time
and
to be there.
uh,
But I mean, I say wonderful. I wasn't there. I lived in New York for several years.
uh,
We have a few people, at least near New York area people here on the call today as
yeah.
well.
Well,
Um,
I came back to New York a few years, quite a few years later, to work as a composer in residence at the Park Avenue Synagogue. That was also a
oh,
very interesting job.
oh,
So
fascinating.
very far away from my musical theater background. Yeah. So I did an orchestral CD for them and composed a few pieces for them. That was also very interesting. Also, you know, because we did a CD called Jewish Romantic Music, and a lot of the pieces were so close to kind of the German romantic music, you know, from Richard Wagner and Schumann. It was very a beautiful, beautiful project, and was also interesting to see how to work with musicians in New York, how they are different from Europe and so on.
How did that come about? That you're, I mean, I'm not familiar with the Park Avenue Synagogue. I'm assuming that they do a lot of cultural things beyond just being
Uh,
a synagogue. But how did that connection get made? Is that something that you apply for, or they reach out, or you're recommended, or what
uh,
happens there?
no, I had that time in New York where I went every weekend. I went to a different church. Yeah, so because the church life is very so diverse, you know, and I just want to see what they are doing, you know, and then I realized, you know, there's so many different ways of doing music in church as well. Yeah, and so I thought, you know, maybe I should go away from musical theater. And I also had kind of in these years, I was kind of moving through all the religions. You know, I worked with a Buddhist monk from Tibet, and you know, all very different things. You know, so I thought, well, let's try to work at a church, yeah, in a church. And then I applied, and the people who responded were the people from the synagogue. And
Fascinating. Well, I
yeah,
love that. I love your style. I like this. You have such a diverse set of interests, you know, from whether
yeah,
it's
yeah,
musical styles or cultural styles or cultural backgrounds. Lovely. Um, I hear you're a pretty good sight reader.
mhm,
Is that true?
yeah.
Any tips? How do I get better? I'm kind of like a mediocre sight reader. What's the secret?
Yeah, I think it's to discover the structure a little bit. Yeah, but go that's so that you distract a little bit from your view. Yeah, but of course, you know, for musical theater, you know, you sometimes have the chords, which helps. Yeah, especially if you. So what I did a lot, you know, was transposing and sight reading at the same time. Yeah, and then you have to kind of feel your way through and think, okay, these are kind of this kind of feels right. Yeah, and that's where the melody goes, you know, and then move along with it. Yeah, but you know, it's mostly I think a feeling for the structure of the music. Yeah, that you also feel if you understand the melody, then you feel where it really wants to go by itself a little bit, you know, and then you of course you have to double check kind of is this really right, yeah, and then you know your styles, you know that romantic music, you know, you would approach it in a different harmonical styles, or but that's what I always, you know, try to look at the whole picture of this piece. Yeah.
Now, and does that often happen then before you're actually playing it? So you kind of review the music and look through it for that, or are you kind of like seeing it as you go?
Yeah, I'm mostly as I go. Yeah. But you know, if I have a glance at it, you know, I feel like okay, I think this could be, you know, something like this. You know, That's guesswork.
What
Yeah,
about if you have to transpose it? Is there a special, you know, hacks that you used to think about transposing on the spot? Because I know you have to do that sometimes with musical
yeah.
theater and things like that.
Well, as with Mozart already, the most important thing is the melody and the bass. Yeah. And then basically, if it's too fast to read it, you what what's in between. Yeah, that's how I do it. I think you should be scared, to offer some guesswork. Yeah, and if it's wrong, it passes by pretty quickly, hopefully.
That's true.
But yeah, and then you still have to fake, that's at least my experience from as an audition pianist. You have to fake a sense of security for the singer. Yeah, perhaps also in the private life. Yeah, so that they feel kind of safe. Yeah, so even if it's wrong what you do, yeah, just pretend that it's going to be all right. I will find you again at some point in the music or later on. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know. It reminds me of riding a bike. My PhD advisor told this story of when he was a child and he hadn't learned to ride a bike yet. He figured, well, the first thing I'll do is I'll learn to balance on it. And so he
Mm,
spent a few days just in the garage, just
mm,
trying to balance without
yeah,
actually riding it. And that
yeah,
was clearly a terrible idea, right?
yeah, yeah.
You just kind of have to move on the thing and then you can start balancing. And I think that probably applies to the projecting confidence thing,
Mm,
right? If you go, oh, I don't have any reason to be confident, right? And then so you don't act confident, and then that is like
mm.
not moving on the bicycle, right? It's like trying to balance without moving versus adding some confidence, adding some positive energy to the equation is actually going to help it be successful, correct?
Yeah, so, see, I didn't ever learn to become a conductor. I just attended conducting class for a few months. Yeah, and these were all older guys at that time. I was still very young, and they already had finished their first studies. Yeah, but what I experienced a lot in the studies of conducting, yeah, that people want to be a conductor to be the boss. Yeah. Now I'll show you my interpretation of this wonderful work, and you have to follow me. Yeah. And that's the completely wrong approach. Yeah. Because in a way, you first have to listen to the orchestra before it even plays. Yeah. Meaning you have to take in the energy of the people. Yeah, and then give them kind of focus that energy into one point and also give the people a sense of security, especially in musical theater if you conduct for the stage. Yeah, I always say, what you're offering, you're offering a safety net. Yeah, and and then people will do whatever you want, yeah, because they feel they can trust you. Yeah, and you do that in a way for them. Yeah, and not the other way around, so that you want to boost your own ego also standing in front of an orchestra. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, one of the first things that came to mind is it's sort of somewhat related, not as directly as I probably like it to be, but I was reading recently some about leadership from John C. Maxwell. It's a pretty popular
Mm,
leadership author and speaker, and he was talking about the difference between leading from position
mm,
versus leading from uh, really just kind of getting people to follow you. Like you lead
mm,
in such a way that people will follow you, and sort of making the point that there's a lot of people who get in a position, be it a conductor or your
mm,
boss or whatever. There's a
mm,
title there,
yeah,
and there's this concept that because you have that title, you can lead.
yeah,
But some people do a very bad job of it who have the title, versus people who might not have the title. They're providing that. I think there's a lot of it there. That sense of security, sense of confidence, a sense of being willing to, uh, you know, lead by example as well. But which I suppose is there any way that applies to be a conductor to being a conductor? Is there ways that you lead by example? I mean, clearly you're not playing any of the instruments of anybody in the orchestra. You're doing something totally different. But do you
yeah.
find that there's ways that you can lead by example there?
Yeah, I mean, I think people feel if you're really a good musician or not. Yeah, even if you don't play an instrument during the rehearsal. Yeah, I mean, because you know how you conduct, you really show if you know the music and if you have an idea of how it should sound. Yeah, so you have to, you know, you have to, you bring an idea across. Yeah, and also motivate people in a way. Makes them, make them enthusiastic about the music they maybe personally even don't like. Yeah, yeah, but when I'm in a comfortable composition position, you know, because I mostly conduct my own music. Yeah, and they are also always try to write music, you know, that every instrument can has an interesting line. Yeah, yeah, and that you write a singable line. You know, but you also have to. But I think you can also make it work, you know, with music that people even don't like. You know, if you have a clear vision where you want to go with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great concept. Yeah, I think you can build an appreciation for people if you frame things in the right way. Uh, we started a little bit late. We're ending a little bit late, but we should wrap up the session. Want to make sure to give you a chance to let people know where they should go to find out more about you and what you're up to. Any recommendations?
Yeah, sure. Also my personal website is Adrian-Werum, also werum.com. And my orchestra's website is now worldsymphony.org. And I think they're quite
The
interesting, you
rest
know,
will
when,
follow from there.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
wonderful. Well, I'll outro us and we'll wrap up the session. I want to thank you very much for joining us.
With pleasure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's been fun talking to you. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and would love to learn more. I mean, again, I think the comment that is outstanding to me is the diversity of what you do and what you're up to is very appealing to me. So I'm looking forward to exploring your music more and checking that out. And hopefully, maybe we'll have you back sometime. So thanks again to you for joining us today, as well as
You're
our
welcome.
audience there on Zoom and out on the social medias. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today by signing up for this session individually, make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hours, just $16 a month. You get access to the recording of today's session in a member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You can sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, pianotechradio.com, the blog at Substack, Piano Technicians Masterclass, and of course our social medias, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. Keep abreast of what's going on. Sign up for the email list at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And we'll see you all again next week. All right. Bye-bye,
Yeah.
Adrian.